This is the Wait Just an Infosec podcast, your weekly opportunity to tap into the minds of some of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts. Wait Just an Infosec is a weekly show live streamed on SANS Institute social media channels on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The show features a wide range of guests from across the Infosec community. Whether we're diving into the weeds of the latest data breach or exploring the security implications of groundbreaking technology such as generative AI, each episode brings you new insight to keep you engaged in the industry, feed your fire for knowledge, and amplify your value as an Infosec practitioner. Join the SANS community and gain free access to cutting-edge industry news, cybersecurity resources like technical research, and tools that can't be found elsewhere. Subscribe for free today at sans.org/join.
On that note, I'd like to re-invite our co-host, Mary DeGrazia, onto the screen. Hey! So folks, again, my name is Ryan Chapman, and I'm the instructor author for Forensics 528 Ransomware for Incident Responders. And this is Mary DeGrazia. We go back quite a ways now. And so whenever I host these episodes, I have Mary on to hang out with me. So Mary, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Ryan? I've been not too far from my neck of the woods, which is nice.
Yeah, are you enjoying the weather? It's not 110,000 degrees out.
It's getting nice there. This is the time of the year where all the snowbirds start coming in. So
it is. Yes. For anyone who's not aware, we're in the Arizona area of the United States. So we have folks who basically co-locate between two locations of the year. So when it gets cooler here, they come over here and just enjoy the great weather. When we're suffering through the heat, the summer heat, they're gone. They're out of here. So, all right, Mary, great to have you on as usual. And we're going to now invite our guest for the day, Mr. Silas Cutler, onto the stage. Hello, Silas. Silas is a world-class reverse engineer. I just want to call you that. He is a steward of Malshare. If you're familiar with the malware aggregation, I'll call it an aggregation site, malshare.com. He's a member of the ransomware task force. He runs OnlyScans, which is actually, I'll let you speak to OnlyScans coming up shortly here. And his official day job title is a resident hacker at Stairwell. So I've known Silas for a while now, and another one of those people that, when I'm hosting, we have on heavy hitters in the ransomware community and the research community. So Silas, it's great to have you on. How you doing?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. Silas, I hear that you scan the internet for bad stuff.
Yeah, if you check your Apache logs, you'll see me probably within about 5 minutes, and then every 5 minutes after going forward. Yeah, I've been scanning and doing broad scanning of the internet since about 2014, 2015. It started out honestly because I wasn't getting enough malware from VirusTotal and wanted more. So it's kind of been a pipeline for me to kind of hunt for badness and find cool stuff to research.
Anyone hear what he just said? I wasn't getting enough malware from VirusTotal. What? I wanted more.
in fairness, what I used to do when I couldn't sleep and had terrible insomnia is when I had a bash script that would pull the last batch of files from VirusTotal of the last 1,000 files, and I would just kind of sift through and catalog and sort them just as a way to practice the kind of routine of file triage. But that gets really boring really fast. And there's only so many times you can look at standard libraries and things before you got to move on to more fun stuff.
You gave a talk at DEF CON 26. I was watching it last week or something like that. Just, internet stalking you because I hadn't seen that one. And you made a comment. You're like, yeah, I have, it was 99.9% of everything that's been on pastebin.com. And I was like, what?
Oh, my gosh. I haven't even thought about it. So that was a project I started, I think in 2011, just to scrape pastebin kind of for the curiosity of what can I find in this big trove of data that's getting posted. And there'd been a bunch of research others had done as well, calling out hey, there's data leaks and things like that. But yeah, I still run that code, actually. I still have the processor written in Perl as well. Still fetching pastes every day.
Fantastic. Okay, now before I forget and we get too deep into the awesome things that you do, and then I'm dying to learn more about, can we bring up the question of the day results? We'll see if we get a little word cloud action here. Hey, there we go. All right. Management has conflicting priorities. Oh, goodness. We in security, a lot of our research projects that we want to do and we think and truly believe or know are super important. You get the idea. A disorganized team. Well, yeah. And I guess team silos there. Not enough people, not enough resources. Same deals. Mary, what do you see there that tickles your fancy?
I think the tools, the not enough resources, I think all of those are something that we can all relate to. I started out in the IT industry and worked my way up into doing digital forensics and incident response. And it always seems that there's not enough people, not enough hours, and not enough time in the day. You're asked to do a million different things, your focus, and you have to prioritize what gets done. So I think all of these are very relatable, and we all run into them into this industry quite a bit.
Silas, what do you see there? Oh, was that our team, or is that just more people were like, yeah, not enough people?
I actually liked the funding one a lot. And I like the funding one because I don't know if any of my projects actually have sort of there's a couple of my projects have some long-term support, but for the most part, most of my projects are done without any funding. At one point, all the scanning stuff was back to a couple like Dell desktops underneath my desk. And I'm going to really pretend that a lot of infrastructure mine is not run in the same way.
I'm looking for the name. I found it. So speaking of not having enough time and not having enough resources, and Silas making the comment that he was essentially alluding to doing a lot of things on his own time, basically, as if you have your own time at this point. I see you everywhere all the time. So I would like to just shout out to Silas. Congrats for receiving recently the President's Volunteer Service Award that was provided to Silas because of his ongoing, we'll get a little clap. I got a little clap going for his ongoing, the servitude to the community and pushing forward with that. So congrats on that, sir. That was really awesome to see you receive that.
It's been awesome. And the thing is like you get out what you put in, and like the community is awesome. And there's no other group that like people in this space are the ones I want to support every day.
I think it's really, we say this lack of funding, but at the same time, I have to think that helps drive innovation. Silas, you mentioned that, you had this need, there's not a tool out for it. You created a website. I saw on there, you had, you mentioned you wrote a little bash script to pull down the last X amount. I noticed that you had an API on Mailshare that has some of those things available, like pull the last, I think it was like last 24 hours. So it looks like, you kind of saw this need, you went out, you built this website, and you included some tools in it to help other people to kind of do what you do. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the APIs you have, and maybe how people can leverage that to do the same type of things as well?
So Mailshare actually is a funny one because I started it because I was really afraid of losing access to VirusTotal. I had just been in my first research job, had access to a huge amount of data that I'd never had before. And so I was terrified that as I was leaving, going to a small startup that my management told me would never succeed. And now it's weird seeing CrowdStrike everywhere. So I went to the small startup, was worried I wasn't going to have access to malware. So I started it myself. And the thing is I tried to build it for what my needs were of some of the really basic tasks. And like, it's a malware repository. So being able to download things, upload things. And then some of the features kind of have come over the years as a natural progression of things. Listing all the samples is fairly database intensive. So I've kind of tried to reduce that a little bit more and more. There's kind of a wild one that I've actually that I'm about to put out. Need to finish writing the PHP code for it. But I want to enable anyone to remotely disable someone's API key. So when you register on the site, you get an API key. However, I'd say once every year I get an email saying, hey, I found this API key. It got posted to Pastebin. And I'll notify the admin, delete the key. But that's a task that I think anybody should be able to do. And if anybody else has a key, being able to remotely and fully authorizing anyone that if you hold the key, you can disable that key until I turn it on, as a way to help others protect each other. But it's also kind of a fun canary because I'd love to see more other providers offering a similar type of security API endpoint where if someone finds API keys and wants to notify the company and help protect someone whose keys might be exposed, they can remotely notify and disable.
Don't you just use the key and send like 10,000 requests every 2 seconds? And
oh my God. I mean, I see all kinds of, and actually one of the things I really love about this site is I love watching people abuse it. Just because like they're always little cheap hacks. They're always somebody just trying to abuse quota or something. No, the site's not running WordPress, so calling all the standard WordPress stuff doesn't work. But it is always really fun watching someone create like 6 or 7 accounts and then start trying to scrape the site. And then a bug happens where the same hash gets queried hundreds and hundreds of times. And you can see like, oh, their script broke and now it's just sort of carried on over time. Yeah, little fun hacks like that. Especially when they could have just emailed and I would have given them an unlimited key.
Silas, can you give kind of an overview, a breakdown of what's internet scanning is all about? You know, you can talk about scraping or actual scanning, and then just maybe speak to some of the tooling and kind of the overall purpose first.
Yeah. So my scanning work actually started out when I first started out, I think I called it Meta Intelligence. I then renamed it because there was a company in DC that had the same name, and filed a cease and desist. Though absolutely awesome folks. So renamed to Project 25499, which was just a random number to not get sued. And now I've been calling it Only Scans. And I mean, it started building off of some of the work that I was doing on a day-to-day basis, like doing reverse engineering. And one of the kind of weird boundaries that I've kind of always seen placed on researchers for a variety of reasons is like where the line is of where you're allowed to research. Like, are you allowed to run a sample that reaches out to an adversary's control server, checks in order for you to be able to see what a full connection in the protocol is between a client and server? Some people's limitations are they can't even do that. But given a lot of freedom that I have and have had, I started looking at this as, well, if I'm letting the sandbox connect to it and I'm already doing the analysis to the degree where I can write an emulator or something that replicates like the check-in process, can I sort of take that to the next level? So if I can speak the protocol of a piece of malware, can I then use that as part of sort of a broad scan of the internet? Because if a server responds to a request to check in for Sliver, the pen testing tool, if it responds to a request that a Sliver server would respond and responds with the correct data, it's likely a Sliver control server. And so it's been a really interesting thing that I've spent a lot of time now trying to understand more, because fundamentally it is an entire conceptual shift in how some research is done. You're still doing the same fundamentals and the same basics, but instead of starting with something like a firewall alert or something where you know that this is a relevant to your org, it starts with the idea that what if we could find everything, every single Cobalt Strike server or every single Sliver server, and then filter down from there, and start to kind of like tell stories from it. Because even within really, really common pieces of malware, there are these really interesting nuanced settings that when you look at the sum of all of the servers out there and you say, okay, this setting is really common, but this one is only used on these 3 servers, you can start to put together these little clusters that are reflective of probably an actor running a couple of control servers and managing a whole series of accesses. And then start to kind of try and understand the stories from the reverse direction. So if you understand what their footprint looks like, you can start to look into who they're targeting and start to try and understand what's actually going on. Quite often I run into people like pen testers. I do a lot of security notifications to pen testers who accidentally leave data exposed. But it starts to become really fascinating because even with a lot of sort of the nation state groups having migrated to commodity tooling that everybody is using, they still stand out sometimes. And sometimes it's those little tiny tuning and tweaking they do that reveals far more than they intended.
So I think the example that's fairly common is used to work for a group called Blackberry Silence, and they put out a book, Finding Beacons in the Dark, I believe is the name of the book. And we were talking about, how do we just find these team servers for Cobalt Strike, the adversary simulation pen testing tool, essentially, that many threat actors have just adopted, like, oh, that's a really good tool, I'll use it also. It's too good, kind of thing. And one of the common things was like the default SSL certificate has you can calculate what we refer to as a JA3 hash of that particular serial number, and just identify on the internet, like, oh, look, they didn't change the SSL cert. And you can just identify it quickly, like, look, that's a team server, that's a team server, that's a team server. And some of them even have like default logins and, ridiculousness. So I think that was first that I really saw the power and capability of identifying these common frameworks and how, especially when I started seeing some of your results, I was like, wow, it's all this common? Like, this is ridiculous. They're all over the place.
Yeah. So, and that's actually been one of the really cool things that I've started noticing. So I really like Census, Shodan, and worked with folks at Census as well for years, and they're absolutely phenomenal folks. My tech stack actually matches theirs fairly closely, so I use ZMap, ZGrab. So Cobalt Strike has been sort of my bread and butter for this for a long time. The first family that I really started scanning for and that drove a lot of the early innovation was WinNTI, specifically version 2, and eventually some company docs that I was doing it, but scanning for that malware. But Cobalt Strike has been kind of one of the most fun ones to play in. Cobalt Strike, though, it is a special place in my heart after all these years, but I'll say I worry quite often about the sort of loopholes that folks use, like the default SSL certs, the predictable beacon check-in pattern being closed down by Fortra. But Cobalt Strike to me is really special because it's also kind of this ultimate training tool for across the industry, because it is a phenomenally well-built tool. It is stable and reliable, and I'd much rather actors use that versus something that their friend who took a comp sci class whipped out in a weekend and is going to be awesome. Totally FUD, but no memory protection, no crash handling protection. So I love red teamers using it because it's a great tool, but I don't want that to get lost in and outweigh the value it provides to defenders, because it is one of these tools that we've torn through so many times. And it's one that defenders know what to look for. They know how to handle it. And it is kind of this ultimate training back and forth, regardless of red or blue teams.
Question for you.
Sure.
Does the general public have the ability to access only scans?
Ooh, so I don't make the full results of what I'm finding public right now. I'd like to, but at the same time, it makes it really easy for adversaries also to know if they've been identified, and then it starts that sort of arms race to avoid my detection. So in general, I wouldn't say that everybody needs to run their own scanner, and it's also one of those areas that I often recommend taking a very careful thought about when you approach scanning, because it is a capability, and it's a capability that once you start to use and be part of, you impact the ecosystem, because you create more traffic, more requests that adversaries may see, and more things that will degrade the capability over time. I'm very pro sharing the data, and I'd rather help someone and provide the data to them so they don't need to scan, but work and collaborate together to ensure that they get everything they want, and we find cool stuff together type thing. Yeah, a lot of value can be gained as well from using Census and Shodan for a lot of the similar purposes. So that Beacons in the Dark report, a lot of things like the default SSL certificates, and even things like body hashes, fave icons, and all those kind of little minor tricks to Shodan dork stuff works really great for finding malware control servers, and that can be piped really well into firewalls for auto blocking rules, and also just general. I feel like I always want to say things like firewall rules, but what I really mean is something like MISP or Synapse in order to search and do research on it, because that's more where my life lives.
As just a member of the community, I want to thank you for your service and reaching out to and being proactive to some of the folks when you do find certain tools that may be configured to target certain organizations, and reach out and say, hey, you need to know about this like now. That's a very, very important service for all of us, and it's much appreciated.
I've had some really great experiences that have kept me doing it over the years. There's companies that have. I notified a university, I think back in 2013, about traffic I saw to one of my malware sinkholes, and they sent me their entire past day's worth of DNS logs, and that was just amazing to me, because I got to hunt for another couple more days because I had something cool to look for. Found a couple new pieces of malware that I hadn't seen before. Yeah, we always get better together.
I do have a question. Sometimes when you find something, let's say like you found this third-party company, something interesting going on, and you reach out to them, do any of them are ever like, what's your angle? What do you want from us? Are you the threat actor that's going to be, how do you kind of handle that interaction when you first reach out to them? Because they're like, what's going on here?
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly common. I notified a website earlier this year that was gunauction.com. So call it a large firearm like a online gun eBay type like store. And in their entire customer database had been stolen, was sitting in an open web directory, pulled it down as I was doing analysis because I thought it was just some actor's staging server. Reached out to the company that had been impacted by it, and they thought immediately that I was the threat actor. In parallel, I also notified CISA, FBI, and generally like parties that I normally trust and want to be aware because that they may hear as well. Though limited, the circle being. Yeah, they definitely thought I was a threat actor. The kind of approach that I like to take is I'll reach out, I'll say, here's what I have, but then I like to follow up at least within 24 hours with some type of written report. I've generally found that threat actors do not like writing boring summary reports of an incident, nor do they usually include technical indicators. But even after that, in that case, I still had quite a bit of difficulty because just general language, back and forth and trying to understand each other, because also coming in from a highly technical vantage point and saying, hey, from scanning, I enumerated this and I found this, it doesn't land. So adjusting language to be as generally commonplace as possible typically helps. It also helps as well if you can find a mutual contact to do an introduction. But in general, victim notification is one of those areas that I think over the next few months I'm going to be focusing pretty heavily on because we just don't have any real good guides and best practices for people that are in positions doing victim notification. And it is a dangerous position. I've had entities think that I'm an aggressive salesperson. Even in the case of when I changed the name for the scanning project years ago, I reached out to the owner of the company saying, hey, I'm running a nonsense project. You're running a business. You have customers. I want to surrender the domain to you. That way I'm not accidentally getting your email. And they also even thought that it was some type of hustle and that I was out for cash in it. It would have been really nice if they covered the domain transfer cost of $5, because that's generally the budget ranges that I work with for things. But I was just trying to let her know that, hey, I'm getting your email. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We always tell everybody, be aware of the social engineering approach. And then it sounds like sometimes it kind of works against us when we're also trying to do something good, because they are taking those steps and they are being cautious. But it's like, wait a minute, I'm just trying to help you out with this situation.
Yep. And I try and be as transparent as possible. So I'm never emailing under a handle I usually use Pink as a handle. I'm never emailing as pink@gmail.com or something like that, which is not my email. and I always try to include things like a LinkedIn or Twitter post. And even in some cases, if it's a company that I feel like may respond well, I'll even include my phone number and say, feel free to call me. I will talk to you on the phone and validate that I am a human. And trying to provide some of those open points helps as well.
You mentioned Open Directory, where the data was being staged, I guess, or stored, and that made me realize that I want to talk about Open Directory scanning, or finding open directories. So for folks who are not aware, the general concept of an open directory, and many times it'll even be web-based, but will just be on a website. You just randomly find that there's a directory open of files that just all the file names are enumerated, and you go boop, 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 and start clicking down. And you'll sometimes find directories with, AnyDesk installers. And then, and I love AnyDesk. They did a great thing recently with a bunch of hackbacks.
I just disabled the keyword for AnyDesk yesterday.
I'm not picking on AnyDesk. I'm just saying, like, some of the ransomware groups love to use AnyDesk because it's too good. It's too good for yourself if they adopt it. So you'll see like the installer for AnyDesk, a bat file to install it, a bat file or a PowerShell script to like uninstall common EDRs or whatever. Sometimes you'll see an actual ransomware encryptor also just staged there, but you'll see like, AD find and a couple other tools and things of that nature. And it's essentially just the repo that these threat actors are like, all right, I'm going to store my stuff there. And then when I break into the network, I'm going to bring my own tools. And it's referred to as BYOT, bring your own tools. And they're like, my tools are right there. I'm going to bring them down. You think they would secure those, but many times they don't. So can you speak to what that's like for you when you find those and how that can help out with research?
Yeah. So I am scanning for open web directories specifically. So open web directories, typically web servers. There are some cases, and there's been some research into things like rsync, and even technically some people consider like anonymous FTPs open web directories. For most of my scanning, it's all web side. If you stand up like an Apache or an Nginx server and you delete all the HTML files in the web root, Apache's just going to serve the folder and be like, "Hey, here's what I have in my web root," and so that will progress also even down into things like subfolders. So I only look at whatever is serving an open web directory at IP address /. So not really going any paths deep because that starts to become a infinitely complex problem. When I first started out, I tried just let's save everything. And I think I made it about 15 minutes before my hard drive was full. And none of it was useful. So I'm specifically looking for doing a file name search based approach. I'm going all out with the details on this just because I feel like the capability is pretty much easy. So keyword based approach, things like Cobalt Strike, Metasploit, and about 50 others. If they pop up and they're in a open web directory, saves the whole thing. And then it's sort of a rush each month to do analysis as fast as possible and to see what I can find. Keyword tuning is one of those things that gets really careful with this system. And for others out there that have started companies in the past month to do this type of work, I feel you on the keyword hunting. So I removed AnyDesk actually yesterday as a keyword because AnyDesk being a really common tool, and I'm not looking for AnyDesk, the company. I'm looking for files named anydesk.exe, any.star.desk.exe. But unfortunately, I was ending up with terabytes of Windows ISO files, Adobe installers that were downloaded from Pirate Bay, and just noise. Reddit actually has a subdirectory, our open directories, and typically leans towards like piracy stuff. But it kind of spawned from people doing things like Google Dorks for open web directories, looking for movies and things. So it's one of those things where I'm always trying to be very careful to filter my keywords towards the data I'm looking for, because if I don't, I'm going to end up with a pile of data that I have to dig through in an already fairly noisy feed. I'd say about once a month, maybe twice a month, something pretty phenomenal pops up. The Year breach was one of them. There was an actor that I was tracking, who I'm still very curious about, that was targeting Military Technology Science Center, bunch of interesting military training organizations in in Europe and South America as well. Odd cases, ones that I'm still running down to this day. So it is a really interesting thing. It does create the volume of noise. Oh, and earlier at the beginning of August, the Akira, I don't want to call them Akira now, but a couple of ransomware actors who were involved in both the Akira ransomware as well as Snatch, and potentially a third. They left their home directory sitting on it. And truthfully, the most common reason that these directories get left open isn't because someone misconfigured a web server. It's because of those Python web server one-liners, where it just starts a web server on port 8000. Can't recommend those tools highly enough to ransomware actors. They will absolutely help everyone at the end of the day. They're really easy to run the command. Oh, my web server's up. I ran it in the background, and I've forgotten that a web server is now still running on my hot point. So it's a phenomenal area to dig through. It's a really cool data feed, but it is a marathon. At least there's a couple thousand I get per month that I'm digging through. But it's a cool data set. It's fun to dig in.
Simple HTTP server, right? That was the old original. Yeah, definitely familiar with those guys.
HFS servers too.
Heck yeah. Okay, we have to wrap coming up here. So question, if folks want to start getting into scanning in general, do you have any tools you might recommend to look at, or any projects that might kind of help them out?
Yep. So before I tell tools, I'll say the most important thing for scanning, and it is something that I have done since I started, is ask permission. Do not ask for forgiveness, and be transparent. When I do scanning, or I want to start scanning from a new hosting provider, I reach out to their team and say, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I want to do. Is this permitted under your terms of service? I don't want to spend a lot of time building a pipeline that's going to work somewhere only for them to get really upset. And I feel like that would be just really not cool of me. So always ask for permission. But once you have permission, Zmap, Zgrab is the stack that I use pretty heavily. I find both of the tools fairly well written. And Zgrab being written in Golang makes it pretty easy to add in new modules as well to add functionality.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so this is the part of the show where we give you the platform for whatever you want to end with. What projects do you have going on? What do you want folks to know about? How can they get a hold of you, etc.?
Yeah. I rarely know what my next 6 months is going to look like. I know that I'm going to be working on victim notification stuff. So if you're involved in notifying companies of breaches, less on the bug bounty side, but more, hey, there's an active intrusion. I'd love to hear more of your stories. So please hit me up on Twitter or email silas@pink.io. If this is the type of data hunting that you like to do as well, drop me a line also. I'd love to talk to more folks and learn about your experiences and the value you're getting out of it as well, and see if there's ways we can work together.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Silas. It's always good to see you, man. Thanks for popping on with us.
Me.
And thank you, Mary, for being my ongoing co-host and rocking these streams with me. Much appreciated.
Much pleasure.
All right. Well, folks, we're going to wrap the episode now. So I want to say thank you to, I have my list of names. Can you see me reading over here? Thomas Wolf and Michelle Peterson for the News Bites segment. A lot of stuff going on in the news right now regarding high-profile attacks, and they were discussed briefly in that segment. And I just want to mention, look into smishing and look into MFA, not just bypass, but social engineering MFA bypass. If you're using SMS MFA in general, that's a problem. And these particular groups that are in the news right now, they love that. That's why they SIM swap. So be very, very careful for that. Look up tips and tricks, and I provided some early in the episode. So hopefully that'll help you out. And thank you to Rich Green for talking about the healthcare forum. I will note again that I have I think we're doing a fireside chat. In fact, I'm doing it with, let's see, who's going to be on with me? Rob Wood and I will be doing a fireside chat. We'll be talking about ransomware as related to healthcare at the healthcare forum. So make sure to check that out. And whenever I talk about healthcare stuff and SANS, I just want to give a shout out to Mandy Birdie. Mandy, she is the one who got me involved with doing a lot of the initial healthcare talks, which led to my class, to Forensics 528, Ransomware for Incident Responders. So shout out if you're watching. Hi, thanks again. And thank you to Silas Cutler for coming on. Always a pleasure to speak with him. One thing we didn't really address, but I probably should just mention it here, is that scanning is not just something you should be randomly doing, of course. I probably should have prefaced that. And this is active scanning. It's not passive, right? It's active reconnaissance. So you have to be very careful for operations security, or OPSEC as we call it. So not just with the servers you might be using, the virtual private servers or whatnot, and verifying in the EULA and just directly connecting. I'm this person, I'm a good guy, and I'm doing this kind of stuff. I'm a good person. Not only doing that, but verifying that your target list doesn't include folks who may be problematic, if you will. So anywho, that's it for this episode. I want to thank the team that runs this in the background. Thank you, as always, for having me on. And I will see you all, I think October 10th, I believe, is the next time that I'll be on. So everyone, go secure your MFA. Go make sure you're not using SMS for MFA, and go see what you can do about smishing. Are your users just randomly receiving text messages and you have no oversight into that? If so, that's not good. What can you do to avoid that? Find out so you don't end up in the news. All right. So signing off, this is Ryan Chapman saying goodbye, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wait Just an Infosec podcast. Remember to join us live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Wait Just an Infosec. You can watch at SANS.org/WJAI, or go to the SANS LinkedIn or YouTube channels. The Wait Just an Infosec podcast will be released every Wednesday at noon. Thanks for listening. See you next week.